guys. We're back today with another episode of Conversations with Therapists. Today we are talking with Vanessa Bradden, founder and clinical director of Lakeview Therapy Group in Chicago. Hi. Hi. We're very excited to have you on today. So let's talk about, because your practice is pretty large. How many? You have six clinicians?
I have, here we go. And I don't know why I always have to do this, right? Count it out loud, but I believe there's 8 of us. And there's a reason there's 8 of us and not more of us at this point in the development of the practice, which I will elaborate on as we talk. But yes, we are an all-women practice in Chicago.
That's so cool. Okay, so let's jump back because we'll get into how many of you there are later. But where did this journey start for you? Like, how did you get started with, I want to open up your practice? Or
Yeah, great questions. For as long as I can remember in my adult life anyway, I've had a desire to have my own business. And I started out working, actually, the background, I'll try to keep it brief, is that I started out in a family business. And then when I decided to go to graduate school, become a therapist, I really was thinking about where do I want to go with this? What direction do I want? And for me, it felt like a natural opportunity to one day have my own practice. It took time to evolve because I'm also a mom of 3 kids. And so while the benefits of being able to work part-time were great, it slowly morphed into this version of what it is today. So I started part-time in 2008, 2009 when my oldest son was very little and my daughter was about to be born. And then I really moved into full-time solo work in 2012. What catapulted me forward, I had an associate for a while prior to 2020, but 2020 really, everybody kind of hit the ground running when we all went into isolation. And the ripple effect of that for therapists was unbelievable. It was such a difficult time for everybody, and we couldn't keep up with the demand. And then I started to really think about I had a sketch in my mind of what I wanted, but I started to create that more formally. And I was like, what do I want to do with this? Which I want it to look like? Why do I want to do this? All the bigger, deeper questions. And I was able to hire these amazing women, the first of which came to me very naturally through a colleague of mine who is a friend of hers. So there's she couldn't hire her for that reason. And then she knew somebody. And so all of that came together rather organically. And then 2 of my other clinicians I hired virtually, which I never imagined in my life, never met them before. And they were marvelous. Like, they turned out to be such a good thing.
When did you hire your first one? Was that during the pandemic or right after?
My very first person was in 2017, and then she ended up moving, and then I brought another person in, just one person at that time, because it was still a lot of balancing mom hat with work hat.
Yeah.
And then 2020 was just like, well, nobody's going anywhere. And so we do actually have a lot of time on our hands, and I can put time into this now because, I'm not running here or there trying to balance activities. There was nothing happening.
I know. So what happened? Were you still going in? You had an office, I assume, right, at this point?
I did end up keeping my office. I thought long and hard about, should I be giving this up, blah, blah, blah. But I decided to keep it because, I don't know, for whatever reason, I wasn't ready to let it go. I'm glad I did keep it, although paying rent when nobody's using something can be a bit of a,
that's scary. That's a big overhead. And you're in Chicago. Where is your office in? Is it in like downtown Chicago, or is it?
No, so I'm in the West Lakeview neighborhood, and it's by design. I can walk to work in like 15 minutes, which is great.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I got to a point in my life where I was like, I really don't want to spend time in a car commuting.
No, and I'm sure Chicago at least has the L, but even then you're still like on a route. I can't imagine that.
Yeah. Well, sadly, I sometimes drive, but that's usually when I'm running late. So
well, and you guys get really cold and like windy, so I could totally see driving if I needed to.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so let's talk about your team, because you've mentioned a few times it's an all-female team, which is so cool. But also that's difficult to like find the right team. Are you guys all what is it like in person, like 90% in person, 90%, I don't know what your
Well,
percentages
that's
are.
an interesting. So, what's unique about what we do is we are a great team. So, I'll talk about our team of women. So, when I said like right now we're at 8, is I have been very intentional and slow in a way, but not like, to me it's not slow. But there are practices out there that have multiple locations. They're huge, so it's growing exponentially, and that's amazing. But I really, part of my why was like I want to create an atmosphere that feels good to people. Typically more people, more problems to deal with in management.
100%.
And I took my time to interview them. I also have them also, if somebody's new, like post 2020's hiring cycle, I sometimes will bring the group in and have them meet someone to get an overall feel. Like,
Oh,
do you
that's
like this
awesome.
person fits well? What are your thoughts? There's a lot of stumbling blocks when you're a small business owner, and sometimes you scrape your knee and sometimes you cut it when you fall. So I have learned a lot about that, and it's a priority of mine to make sure that I can handle what I already have. And so that takes time. So if I bring somebody new in, I want to make sure that they have what they need before I think about someone else.
Yeah.
And I only have so much time to give, to be the support person too, right?
Yeah.
Ellison and I, our last 2 hires
So
were former kindergarten teachers, and so now we joke that we only want to hire kindergarten teachers for staff. They're organized. They're great at balancing.
they're organized and that's so sweet.
Yeah, and they're good at like juggling
Yeah.
like all the things because they have a classroom full of 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
That to me is like my worst nightmare. But
That is a special skill set that is really overlooked until you're in it.
Yeah.
Like as moms, we're like, wow, you are amazing. I don't know how you do this,
Well, and like, how do you not get personally offended when like someone says something mean? Because little kids have no filter, like I don't necessarily get personally offended, but one kid like said something mean to my daughter in kindergarten, and I was like, "You're done. You're on my list, little kid." And I'm like, "Wait, you're a 5-year-old. I need to cool it. Like, chill."
But they have that in their heads, I'm sure.
Yeah, but okay, so why all female? Like, what was that on purpose? Is it?
Well, on purpose, I'm not sure. I didn't intentionally say all women, but that's how it's worked out, and most of that is really the profession itself has typically drawn more women than men in through the field. Now, I think that that's changed since I started, and there's more men interested in the field. But that's just typically where I was getting interest. And then as I've formulated more of my like, well, what do I want this to look like, and why am I doing this? All these questions. It started to make sense to me that there is a part of what I value is allowing my employees to be able to work the way they want to work. And so hybrid is one of those things, but the other is like, I remember when I became a mom and I had to fight so hard to get a part-time position for the first 6 months, for the first 6 months of my son's life, and all the struggle and emotion that went with that. And that I feel guilty going back to work, and how can I leave after 12 weeks of unpaid, right? So I was able to finagle that, which was wonderful. And I had the best boss at the time. And I appreciated that leadership. It made such a big difference in my life overall. Typically our profession, we're not at the top of the earning bracket. So it's really important to me to be like, what makes sense to you? What is balanced for you? And for people to want to stay, there has to be an environment of flexibility and understanding.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So you're a group practice, and there's definitely different types of group practices. Like we've met with people who you only get your clients through the group practice, but yours is different because you do have people that come straight to the website and like do the forms that way and just want to be probably paired with a clinician, but then they can go out and also still get their own clients, right? Like they're not.
Well, all the clients that come into the practice are the practice's clients,
right?
But there's different ways that they come in. A lot I would say right now, the majority are the website. We advertise on Psychology Today, which is a big one that drives traffic in. There's also a platform called Therapy Den that one of my therapists has a lot of, that does well for her. Sometimes what ends up happening, we can get referrals into, and it's not the right fit, in which case I'm sending them out to colleagues and friends and trusted referral sources, because it's not the right fit. We don't actually specialize in that kind of, area, or we don't have any openings. That's also sometimes an issue. So then I will refer out to people, which is also part of our networking efforts as private practitioners. There's a lot of paying it forward that comes back to you in a really positive way.
So Jennifer and I hosted, it was our first one, so there were some bumps in the road, but it was really cool to see. Like, it was a in-person therapist networking group, where we kind of talked about like the importance of having social media presence and having a web presence, but also like they just were so excited to have a networking presence. Like they were like, there's just not a lot of known opportunities. You really have to like put yourself out there. So this is really cool to be able to at least get and sit and have lunch with other therapists. And I'm like, oh gosh, I hadn't even thought about that.
Well, I also think about like the crossover of technology and like my old school way of marketing,
which
was a lot
was,
more drive to
you would
keep
send
it
a
kind
thank you
of
note after an interview.
competitive and not do the things that network.
I like to track the referrals coming in, so that if it is personal, like a colleague, a friend, somebody who's like thought of us, I do send an email thanking them. Thank you for thinking about us, because I think it's also important to keep that personalized piece going.
Yeah, I think so too. So do you guys do you do a lot of professional networking? Like, what does that look like for you guys?
The professional, that's a great question. What does the professional networking look like? I think that
You're welcome for that curveball.
thank you for that curveball. I love it. I think I did more of the personal networking at the beginning of my, build toward, and now it's more, everybody's really busy. And I will say one, and now I'm segueing to try to avoid your question. No, I will say that one really great thing about the pandemic, which there weren't a lot, was that we've raised a lot of awareness of acceptance around reaching out for help, and that it's okay, and that we're here, that this is actually a really important thing for us to take care of, the engine, right? What's under the hood. If we're taking care of that, everything else is so much more difficult. So I believe like now it's a lot of, I will join certain webinars or like group opportunities when I know that there's going to be other clinicians. A lot of it ends up being virtual. So that's one way that you do networking.
That's so interesting. That was gonna be my second part, is like, I feel like the pandemic shifted that. It shifted a lot of things, especially, and we'll talk about this, the work-life balance, because you kind of touched on that when you were way before the pandemic, when you were kind of trying to figure that out with mom and work and life. But yeah, this whole concept of going out and meeting people, especially within your organizations or within your industries, like people haven't fully jumped back into it, or all the people that were maybe graduating during the pandemic and looking for jobs are not sure how to go about that. So I think that's something that I'm hoping is kind of becoming more and more mainstream again. But was it mainstream before the pandemic? I really don't know.
Not so much virtual. The funny thing about the virtual therapy, I do remember having a conversation with a colleague of mine very close to the pandemic and all of that, saying there's no way therapy will ever go online. How would anybody do therapy virtually? And part of that was my own fear of like technology and how it's not a place of comfort. And so, our offices feel like our place, our domain, we know what we're doing, and that's our product, that's our space. We create it for people, we make it safe. And then all of a sudden there's this virtual leap, and literally overnight we all had to do it.
Literally.
And in hindsight, I do a lot of virtual now, because it's made my work-life balance so much better. I used to work, 2 evenings a week until 9 p.m. I used to work Saturdays.
Oh my gosh.
Really in the beginning, I was doing a lot of hours so that I could have a couple of days in between to be with the kids.
Well,
So
and like,
you can imagine it's not restorative, right? Like,
no,
just go.
You
Yeah.
can deal with all these other people's problems, and then you go home and you got to still deal with your kids and their
Okay.
issues and like, you know,
But now
yourself.
I'm in a different phase of parenting, and I have very, the virtual has afforded me this wonderful schedule, which to me just looks like Monday to Friday during the days, and I get my evenings back, and that therefore I'm available more to my children.
Yeah.
Who are growing very quickly.
That's super nice. Okay, so you talked about how your work-life balance is, and then what about your clinicians? Like, how are they doing with that?
Yeah, I think they're overall, I don't want to say, I'm talking up too much. But I do think overall they're doing very well. I tell people when I hire them, how much do you or don't you want to work?
Mhm.
If you want to be full-time, then we're going to get you to full-time. If you want to be part-time, then tell me what part-time looks like to you, and we're going to make that happen for you. And I anticipate, like, part of what I have to do is anticipate the changing needs as we move forward. People might start families, and then seeing 25 people a week becomes very difficult, right? So
Right.
like figuring out how to fill some gaps there as an owner, like when I need to hire another person so that that person could go to a more reasonable schedule for themselves.
Yeah.
I love that
What does that look like?
Sorry,
Go
I
for it.
love that you're working on the culture for not only the clients that come in and who you speak to, but you're working on the culture for the people that work for you, that so that they feel the same sense of balance that you're trying to instill in your mostly female clients. And then you also have this whole family culture you're trying to uh, live an example and like a reflection of as well. It's like it sounds like 3 jobs, but that's kind of what you have to do
Yeah.
to build the dream, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think Jennifer and I as business owners are learning that like it's not just one hat you have to wear. You do have to wear all these other hats, and then you just get better with it. You get better at it as like you learn and again fall and tear the skin fully off your knee,
Yes.
or you just like have a little boo-boo that you can wipe with a tissue. But yeah, like
Yeah.
I think that is a very good analogy.
It's
for
the
them.
truth, right? It is. I really missed that one, but it teaches you so much. So,
It does.
learning now, I'm much better at anticipating and thinking through, like, okay, what do I need? I need to look 3 steps down before I, do this. And,
Yeah.
it's like, how do we learn anything? Because one of the inherent challenges of just the mental health training, I think, is that for people who want to be private practice owners, whether they like buying their own, whether they want to be there's no real business training, right? And I get
No,
it.
none.
We're not in it getting a business degree, but I think even just having one or even like a certificate or something that's easier to access, right? You don't have to make it a full course, but something that just gives people tips and pointers. I do think that role is getting filled by a lot of practice owners that are like, there's a lot here that we could put out there for people to help them so they're still, I mean, I think everybody does need to fall and bruise their knee and even sometimes, have the skin pulled off, as you said.
Yeah.
But I also think like it's good to pass that knowledge along.
Yeah.
And private practice is more appealing to a lot of people these days because it is harder to make a living in agencies and it's very hard, and people's their debt ratio, right? School debt,
Yeah.
all of that is very hard.
So, before you had your first kid, were you working for an agency or were you?
I worked for a not-for-profit, working with older adults for a long time. And part of that for me, really, it was hard to leave because I had such a great environment. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a great environment until it wasn't a great environment but for so many years, I would say, like, how are there so many amazing women in this group? And how is it that the energy between all of us flows really well?
Yeah.
And that felt so unique to me. And I had a lot of good bosses, who I appreciated and learned a lot from. So I think in some ways, you look back and then you can see why something was part of your journey. I think at the time I was frustrated because I really just wanted to be doing clinical work with people. That was what I went into it for. That is what I wanted to do. But there weren't opportunities, especially for marriage and family therapists. There were not opportunities to have a preliminary license and work in a private practice.
Oh,
It's taken us a lot longer to get those same, because there's different ways that you can take a path to becoming a private practitioner. And so there's like social workers, which everybody knows about. There's the social work track. There's the licensed clinical practitioners, which people know about. But there's also the licensed DRG therapist, which is a newer
yeah. But
medical.
like that's coming up. Like more and more people that we talk to are LMFTs and or getting that certification. It's just
I mean, the training is incredible. You know, it was when I first stumbled upon it, I was reading more and then talking to people. The more I learned, the more I was like, this is a language that just makes sense to me. You
yeah.
know, it was like I suddenly understood something very clearly.
Yeah. So with you having an all female practice, like what do you guys have specialties, or do you kind of automatically gravitate towards certain like not specialties but like people or
Well, in terms of being like a particular modality, like, so some practices, for example, are like, we do anxiety only, and it's DBT, CBT, very structured. We have each clinician, and I encourage them to find the thing that they really want to work with. So we have different skill sets and similar overlap, right, too, because that's inevitable. We have some differentiated skill sets. I have one clinician who is really skilled with trauma work, and has a specific interest in spiritual and religious trauma, and that's like a very nuanced thing. And
that's kind of a newer
that's
yeah,
definitely newer one that I think, is not everybody's going to be able to do that, right? Then there's I have another clinician who's very interested in learning more and working with perinatal and postpartum depression, and then just that age and stage of life. Now I keep aging into new categories, but I have a particular interest in helping women that are going through the end stage of women's changes into menopause, and it's just remarkable to me how little we talk about it, how ill prepared, and I would say this across the board, for like from the time you hit puberty as a woman all the way through, that like, why did I be prepared ever for all of these things, or at least where is my trying to talk about these so I feel less lost or confused, or like I know other people are also experiencing this. So I think it's super important. I've observed it over a long period of time. There's like such a shift, and the power of, and there's a lot of loss in each of these stages, right, for women. So while there's no articulation for adolescents, they don't necessarily cognitively really understand. There's a sense that we're losing our childhood when that shift happens. And then we have to manage this thing that everybody hyped up for us, every month, and then we're like, why was this a thing?
Yeah,
and and then these poor young women who have one foot in childhood and one foot in adolescence, are trying to figure out who you are.
Yeah.
And it's a very material thing. And then I think that continues, and there's a lot of things that happen during the perinatal, when people get into childbearing years, the pressures that women feel, and for some people it works easily, for other people it doesn't. So there's like a whole area there. There's a lot of very, like, within that umbrella, there's all these like little niches that people could cultivate for people. In my experience, there's a lot of lost time to all of those.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, even just like the obvious, like, wait, pregnancy loss, then you also have this, what you were saying, this loss of childhood. Like, I've never thought of it like that, but yeah, I mean, my kids, I keep telling my 6-year-old, she's like, when do I get to wear a bra? And I'm like, you don't want to. Like, it's going to be the worst thing ever, because then you're going to like it. Yeah.
But
you'll like it for a week.
As a teenager, it's like, are you though? Do you want to be? I don't think that means.
Well, and the sad part is, it's like this is what I say, nothing that I ever imagined actually. There's this great drop to disappointment in life, right?
Yeah.
So the expectation you hold in your head and what actually is going to happen, very, very different. And you wish you could just cushion them, I see this a lot. I have 3 teenagers, and I see this a lot. I'm like, well, okay, I think you're expecting this to be really, and I think you might be disappointed,
Like,
But I
like
also don't want to
here's your bar. You need to lower it just a smage, but you also don't want to rush them with,
well, not to be too cynical, but there is that expression, like the expectations of premeditated resentments. They really do cause us problems.
yeah.
But
So, do you guys specialize? Your clinics, oh my gosh, does your practice, words are hard to say, specialize in these like women? They're not like women's issues. They're just like
it's an
women's.
umbrella. That's the
Right.
one thing I would put it. Yes, I think we have an expertise that we offer in the area of women's health, and I think it would be, certain clinicians would be better fitted for particular demographics, right? So depending on
Yeah.
what stage, what phase, what age you're at, and what you're struggling with, but also just when we talk about life transitions, which is this saying for all, it's all life transition, right? We can fit that in, but I think it's important for people to understand that these shifts and changes really, really impact our self-esteem, our self-worth, our identity. And so we really, we work a lot with all of that. But you can, I think of like a lot of these issues like a quilt where you're like weaving together all the pieces. There's connections between all of these things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so we do a lot of making those connections and helping people see things from a different light. So, somebody had said to me when I was, what I was going through that terrible time of becoming a teenager, it's really sad, isn't it? You feel like your childhood's over here and you're trying to figure out how to be over here. That would have been such a sense of relief for me. So I'm not going crazy. Great. Okay. So people feel this way. And so I personally, I think a lot of my work is guided by loss and grief, but I don't. Can I say I'm a specialist? Yes. Do I want to always be that specialist? No, because you have to be able to. When we talked about work-life balance, we have to be able to gauge like what percentage of that am I able to really hold for my clients and still be available to other people in other parts of my life and to myself.
Yeah.
Because, it takes a long time as a therapist to kind of toughen that part that says, this is my work and this is my life. But there's always going to be somebody where you're just like, I just can't believe the things that happen to people. You believe it, but you're also just like, and it's not like you can become very deeply invested. People, you care deeply, and then you see them struggling with these losses that don't make any sense, or that you can't say to them, it's going to work out. Like, we can't make those promises to people.
No.
And especially with things, for example, things like IVF and infertility, where women are just like, they want this so badly, and they're in a lot of pain, and they're feeling really isolated, and they look around and all of their friends, everything just seems to be happening,
Yeah.
Why isn't that happening to me? And then you're trying to hold space for that and also say like, there's no guarantee. You just have to keep at it. But there's a lot of grief in that for people.
Well, and then I think there's also that like they're looking for, when do we know when to stop? Like, when do we know when to move on from this isn't going to happen to let's look at what other possibilities or options there are. Because I think that's definitely something. There's also so I did not have any of those fertility issues. Like, that was not a thing. But then like I had friends that did, and we've talked about it. So it's a different kind of guilt. It's like, and I don't know how to talk about it, like, because I didn't have to go through that, so I don't have that understanding. So I think it's really amazing that you're practicing how to have those conversations, and maybe even how to let somebody who hasn't been through that, how to have that conversation with someone else. Like, the appropriate, because there's definitely inappropriate things to say. But
and I think that you make a really great point, Alyssa, because I think, and people don't do it. The reality is people don't do it knowingly. Like,
no, it's like it just comes out, like it just
right. And people are generally leading from what their own experiences have been. And so if you can't know what you don't know, And that's
Yeah.
just a fact of life. It's like a child who grew up with two parents who didn't have a lot of conflict and they stayed together and they were happy can't really understand a child whose parents divorced and had a lot of conflict. But they shouldn't try to say they understand it, but rather like that's where people look for validation. And it's even like it seems obvious, but I don't think it's obvious to people. You can just say, I know nothing about your experience, but I can imagine it was really hard.
Yeah.
Tell me about what that was like.
Well, and I think it's getting more and more common. I feel like even when I was a kid, things were minimized. Like, it's okay, you're gonna bounce back or, whatever. But really, it's okay to not be okay. Or like and what I've been working on is like levels of trauma are different. I didn't necessarily go through this like rock bottom issue or trauma, but yet I have anxiety. So it's like, is my anxiety less important because it's smaller than somebody who's maybe gone through, I don't know, something horrific? But it's just like you still feel all the things that come with it, and you have to talk about it, or
That's right.
it
Yeah. Yeah.
just
I think
happens.
there's like they talk about like big T's and little T's, like the degrees of trauma. But the truth is that everybody experiences some degree of trauma. It's part of life in the sense it's, there's obviously some that are just catastrophic and hard to believe. Like how do you really sit with sometimes you can hear some really, really painful things from people,
Yeah,
things that it's hard
sure.
to make sense of. But I think the reality is that when we're not sure of something, it's best to either engage in an action item, like, is there something I can do? Or just admit, I don't have any clue how to help you. But I just want you to know I'm here. I'm your friend, happy to support you. But I don't want to fill the space with things that might make things worse for you.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about these women's health issues. I mean, it's like mental health, physical health, like all this stuff. And obviously, you're talking with other women, like these are your clients. But are there significant others getting involved? Like, are you seeing a lot of like, I don't know, specifically men that want to
Well,
learn
we
how to
work a lot with couples, right? We get a ton of couple referrals, and I would emphasize that neurodivergent therapists also see individuals. We see individuals and couples. So yeah, we see men in therapy often as couples. We do have some men that come on their own. I think that that's becoming more like, again, a byproduct of the pandemic is that more men, I think, feel like they can go. And more, when you talk about sort of even when you were a kid, this has been internalized for centuries. Men who are like, you don't need to go to a therapist. Why would you want to talk to anybody? That's not going to help with anything, right? That also it's been part of male identity and masculinity that you're strong and you don't cry and you continue, soldier on. And while those can be great traits for a lot of things, and they're very adaptable and adaptive, not adaptable, but they're very adaptive in the sense of like, okay, war, I don't have time to cry. I got to get out there, right? Or if you look at hunters and gatherers, well, we need food. I don't really have time to. So I think there may be something in our DNA that makes that different, but I do think more men are reaching out and going, it's still not percentage-wise the same, though.
No. Well, and like just based on conversations with the male species, like they just don't even communicate the same way that women do. Like their group, like my husband and his group of friends, in my opinion, they all stay very surface level in their friendship. And then like someone mentions any kind of like bump in the road and it's like, whoa, like, we don't know how to talk about this. Like, what do we do? And so, I think that I'm hopeful that as time kind of gets going and goes on, that more men, especially if you have a daughter, like you need to know how to at least try to approach some of these issues. That general sex ed class that we all had in like 6th grade, like that's really surface level. Like that covers nothing. So, it's just interesting to think about like your practice kind of talking about all of these issues for women, but it's like,
but I think these issues directly affect the men. For people who do partner with men, it is important to be able to talk about these issues with a level of comfort and not feel embarrassed or ashamed or that this is really weird. Like, for example, why is it so difficult for some men to go to the store and buy their husband feminine hygiene product or buy their wives? This should just be natural, right? And there's all kinds of reasons for that. It's, and a lot of it is just lack of education, that we have not normalized this as like it's part of biology.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna happen regardless of whether you talk about it or not. Like, it's
And I think it goes a long way in the relationship. In a way, it's like, let's take you, like that feeling of like, oh, that didn't freak you out. Great, thank you so much for doing that. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but I think it is important for that to be something that we educate our sons about and normalize. And I always joke that, like, if somebody tells me, oh, I met this really great guy and he has like 2 sisters or 3 sisters or 4, I'm like, you should marry him. Because he really just is gonna know how to do the things.
I mean, like, step 1, if he doesn't gross out with things, you're in. Like, way to go.
But I think that's a great point that you're making. Like, why is it gross?
It's not. It's gonna happen. Like, it's
right.
Right.
But all the way through, there's a lot attached to it that I think, like, we as women even don't talk. Like, we also quiet ourselves around these issues because, for example, my experience around this stage of life of menopause is like, people don't want to talk about it. There's a feeling I'm no longer attractive. I'm losing my value. I'm not, because we associate it with aging. And so now your purpose of life, you can't have kids anymore. Like, as if that's the only purpose one would. So, do you know what so there's that piece where I think people need to feel, and especially women need to feel more like, and isn't it great that we no longer have to deal with that nonsense every month, and that we can
like throw them out the window, throw your tampons
or that
out
we
the
can just
window.
feel really good about, like, embracing the parts of it because we can't change it. Like, yes, there is a sense that, like, loss of estrogen and people notice themselves aging in different ways, but why can't we make that a good thing?
Yeah.
You've been told
That's really cool.
since forever that women don't talk about money or their bodies.
Yeah. So which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it's changing a lot.
Yeah.
I think so. I think your practice is helping.
Thank you. I hope so.
Little by little, especially in Chicago. Not that Chicago is like, this super rural place. But Chicago's huge. There's so many people that are there in all walks of life, every level of life, whatever it may be. And I think that that's amazing to start with that. I don't know, not start with it, do it all. Like, I think that's so cool. That's cool. Okay, so we've talked a lot about women's health, but obviously you still see men in your thing. So what are the men mostly coming to you for marriage counseling? Like, they're
well, I think that's the majority in our practice, but individual men come in to work on, different personal issues around anxiety or depression or life changes or even just relationships. There are men that say, I really want to work on, or I'm dissatisfied in this part of my life. So there are men that seek that out and want to do their own self-improvement work. That does happen.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, like, societal pressure on men too. Like, we talk about women get a lot of it, the brunt of it. But, men, like, I gotta make this much money. I gotta be able to support all this stuff. I need to, financially be able to blah, blah, blah. And it's like all.
Well, it's made much worse by social media. It's made much worse.
I hate social. I work in social media, but I hate looking at social media. Like, I'm just like.
I talk very often with clients about the comparison traps, that's just a no-win situation for, if you start to go down that path, you're just going to circle and you're going to find yourself in a spiral and not feeling good about yourself. We don't actually know if someone's life is this way. It's all just smoke and mirrors. Nobody's posting the worst parts of themselves on social media. But I also think that these avenues to become extremely wealthy are distorting things for young people. Not everybody's going to be a bajillionaire YouTuber, right?
No, it's so difficult to get to that level. It's so difficult.
But it creates this ridiculous expectation or false hope or fantasy. And that's the cognitive distortion, right? That is, don't measure yourself over here. You have to look at other measures of success to truly evaluate where you are.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, this has been a really good talk. I feel like we could talk about this for forever, but
I know. I feel like I did talk to you guys like on and on. So
oh, thank you. We love
yeah.
we are so excited that you were on today. And I hope that, you felt like this was a good chat for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being on here. And if you guys want to go check out, if you live in the Chicago area and want to go check out Lakeview Therapy Group, we will link everything in the bottom and you'll get to maybe meet Vanessa in person.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alyssa, and thank you, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to talk
Thank
to
you.
the two of you.
You too. Talk to you later.
Take care. Bye-bye.